So in this video tutorial, I wanted to teach you how you can take a pattern from your Digital Craftorium USB into Canvas Workspace, and then you can send any panel from any box and put that pattern into it. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to my scan and cut. I've got my USB in place, and I'm going to go retrieve data from the USB. And I'm going to go right down to the bottom, and this is where you find your patterns folder. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to choose pattern number 4 just because I like I like all of them, but I think this is a nice one to teach you with. So now I've got this. So the scan and cut right now sees it as a square with all those pieces sat on top. Okay. Now they're not, the whole thing is grouped together. All right. Because if you just want to cut it out of stencil material, you can do that. Whenever you, or more often than not, depending on how the file is saved, and we make sure we save ours in the correct way, when you take it into Canvas Workspace, it will ungroup it because we haven't done what we call compounding the path. And if you watch the pattern overview video, I talk to you about what a compound path is. But because we haven't done that, it sees it as a square with all those pieces sat on top, even though it's a grouped shape. So when I save it into Canvas Workspace, I can ungroup that shape, and I can also divide it or compound it myself. So rather than talking about it, because it's a lot of technical words, and if someone was sitting there talking at me like I'm talking at you, I'd be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Show me. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to press OK, and I'm going to save that into the cloud. So I'm going to save it into the cloud so it will then appear in my Canvas Workspace projects. If you haven't got a Wi-Fi enabled machine, you will take your USB out of your machine, you'll put it into your computer, and when you go into Canvas, you will import the file in from there. So if I go into new now, because I want a new project on Canvas, to import a file, you go to SVG at the top. It asks you to choose the file. When you click choose the file, it opens up your computer and you will go to the USB drive, and then you will choose your pattern from there. You'll double click it and it will put it into this box here. Okay, and then when you press OK, it will bring it up on the screen. So I'm going to do this because I have got a Wi-Fi enabled machine and that's what we're working on. I'm going to do this now and get it from my project. So whenever you save anything into Canvas from your machine, it will always go into my projects. So if I click on my projects now, there's the pattern that we've just brought in. So all you do is click on that and it brings it up on the screen. Okay, which is fabulous. So it's there now, ready to go. If we go up to edit at the top, it's now, can you see, because it's not one shape, because it hasn't been compounded, so the scan and cut doesn't see it the way that we see it. It sees it as a square with all those pieces on top. All that can be ungrouped. So you could then just have that row or those two rows with the diamonds in between, or you could grab all this row and group it and duplicate it and move it over here. So let me show you a little bit of that first, because that's quite cool. So if I go to the bottom here, what I want to do first of all is punch all those shapes through that square. That's what creating a compound path means. It means that instead of seeing it as lots of shapes, it then sees it as one. Instead of it seeing that as a shape sat on top of the rectangle, it sees it as an aperture. So if we divide it first, so if we divide, there's a blue and black bar comes up at the top. When I then grab the square and move it out of the way, all these pieces is what it's punched through. So this is like the waste out of a punch or a die. With this one still selected now, if I go to edit, it can no longer allow me to ungroup it because now it's one shape. It sees it as one solid, one piece. So I can't ungroup one thing because there's nothing to ungroup. So that's a little bit of how. So this now if we'd saved it as a compound path, this is what it would be. Because we didn't, and we ask you to press that one divide button, it gives you all these other options. So for example, now I can just left click on my mouse and drag and select just those fabulous little label shapes there. I can then go to the top and edit, and I can group it, and then I can go to edit again and I can duplicate it. I can then take the duplicated one and I can put it across here and drop it into place like that. And then you'll just use the arrows on your keypad to just nudge that so you've got that fabulous replication. So now we've got that. We can then ungroup that one. So go to edit and ungroup, and we can ungroup this one by going to edit and ungroup, because that was the one that we grouped originally. And now what I can do is drag across here and just pick up the top layer there. So now I can go to edit and group that, and go to edit and duplicate it. And when you hover over it, if you use the web app version of Canvas Workspace, not the one that you download onto your computer, when you hover over the icon on the screen, it tells you what it is. That's a really good way of learning this. So then I'm going to drag that down to the bottom, and I'm just going to position that in there like so, and then just nudge it across so it's perfectly lined up like that. So now I've taken that and I've made it completely symmetrical. So now I can go to edit and group it. And then if I go back and I bring on a square, so go into basic shapes and select the square, I can then drag that round there. And now because it's got a shape, an outside shape, and all those pieces, we need to divide it again. So we drag a box over those two pieces, we go to edit, and we divide it again. So wait for that blue bar to change. Not much changes on your screen, but now when I move that, I've got one design, two designs, and I've still got all this left to play with as well. So the difference between a graphic designer pressing a button that compounds a path and a crafter saying, please don't do that because we can do it in Canvas Workspace, which by the way is free. I love that. You've got all these different options. But one of the best options, and this is what I want to show you, really, that was just kind of a sideline. You can group that now if you wanted to. So you could go to edit and group. And if you want to save all three of them, so your seamless pattern, your waste pieces, and your symmetrical pattern, if you just go to project at the top and you click the plus button, it comes up and it says save as another project. You can save that and then it's stored in your projects. Okay, so the piece that we want to work with is this one. So I'm going to get rid of that one because it's already saved. In fact, let's work with this one because that's the one that's symmetrical and it's been completed. So let's just grab that and move that. Come on. Move that onto the screen. Bear with, hands are going a bit wobbly today. So let's get rid of that one and let's move this over. But I don't want you to think that you have to make it symmetrical to be able to do that. So I'm going to go back to my scan and cut now, and I'm going to import one of the matte layers into Canvas Workspace. So I'm going to press OK on here and get rid of that one. And we're going to go back into our retrieve data, into our USB, and let's do the triangle box because it's a different shape. Let's go into our matte layers and let's go into the triangle outer box. So remember, the largest triangle is if you want to cover over the whole panel of your box, so you don't see the card that the box is made out of. The middle size is the one that you use as your first matte layer, so it's slightly smaller than the actual side of the box. And the smallest one is the one that we use to put the pattern into, because then you've got your box layer, your first matte layer, and your pattern layer. So we don't need that one. And we don't need that one. We just want that one. So we can press OK and we can save that into the cloud. Once it tells me it's saved successful, I go back to Canvas Workspace. Now this is something you need to know as well. When I go to my projects now, that triangle isn't there, even though I've saved it. And that's because Canvas Workspace was already open. And when it's already open, to get anything new that you send into it, you need to refresh. And when you refresh, it will then put the file that you've saved onto here. So we've now got that triangle. So there's a couple of things that we need to do first. This panel, this triangle here, has been sized perfectly so that when you put it on top of the middle mat layer, it gives you a perfect 3mm border. If we put the pattern into here, it will cut into that mat layer if that's what you want to do. So you can have it cut in like a stencil would be. But if you want it to cut out, so you physically then glue it on top of that mat layer, we need to do something else first. So we know that this is the correct size that we want the finished piece to be. So we're going to create what we call an inward offset line. So we're going to ask it to do a 3mm smaller triangle, not just scaled down by 3mm, but coming in at every point on every angle of that triangle by 3mm. So to do that, we go to Edit, and we go to the Edit section that drops down, and we go to these two concentric circles. And these are on the SDX, but they're not on the CM machines. So to do it on a CM machine, you need to do it here. So we're going to create an offset line. We want the spacing, so you just click 3mm. I want it inward because I want it smaller. And I want it to leave the original as it is because we're going to use that as the triangle that cuts the whole thing out in the end. So we're going to leave it as it is. And then all we do is press OK. So now you can see we've got two triangles. We've got the one that we're going to put this pattern into, and we've got the one that is then going to cut the whole thing out. So we're going to bring the triangle onto here. Now you can, if you want to, align this. So we're going to drag a box across both of those. We're going to go to Edit, and we're going to align it centrally vertically. Go to Edit and line it centrally horizontally, and that will put it bang in the middle of that square. But your pattern, you might think, well, I've got a bit too much of that down there and I want a bit more of it up here. So you can then just click on it and just use your arrows to nudge up or nudge across slightly. So at the top there, I can see that there's more of this part here than there is of this part here. So I'm going to nudge that over slightly so that that becomes more even. And I can probably go one more like that. So when you're happy with the positioning, this is the important bit. And nothing changes on your screen, so you'll think that it hasn't worked, but it has. With the triangles selected, you're going to go to Edit, and you're going to send that triangle behind that pattern panel. And that's crucial, because if you don't, it doesn't work. Then you're going to drag a box around both of those and select both of them. You can't select all because it would select that as well. Then you're going to go to Edit. In Process Overlap, you're going to go to the one that's on the right hand side. It's called Subtract, and you're going to click that. And it then puts that pattern into that triangle. Then we bring this triangle back in, and you drag a box around both of those shapes. You go to Edit and you align it centrally vertically, go back to Edit and align it centrally horizontally. And depending on the design and the shape, sometimes it lines it up perfectly, sometimes it doesn't. So you can see at the bottom here, there's a bigger gap than there is up here. So all we do is click on that triangle and we move it up until we've got it central, which is about there, I would say. So now you've got your pattern in your triangle. So you go to Edit and you can either group it so that it stays as two separate pieces, or you can divide it so that it punches that pattern through that triangle. It's entirely up to you how you choose to do that. So let's just group it, and then we would send this back to our machine, and that pattern is now in that panel. And you can do that with any of the 30 patterns, which is just fabulous. However, there's other things that you can do. It doesn't have to be one of the patterns from the panels that are inside here. So let me show you this, because this is super cool. So I'm going to bring this on again. We're going to get rid of that one. So click off, get rid of that one, put that in the bin. And we're going to keep that one because that's our symmetrical one. Doesn't matter. The difference between a seamless one and a symmetrical one is because I've balanced all these shapes around here because I've grouped them and moved them. And this one is a seamless pattern. So I would duplicate that, move the whole thing across, and it would duplicate the width of that shape, if you like. But that's a whole different thing that we can get into at a different time. So I'm going to put that in the bin. But what if I told you you could take any shape? So let's go into our basic shapes and let's choose a heart, for example. So I can bring the heart on that's on here and I can position that more or less where I want it. I can then stretch it if I want to, and I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to duplicate it. So go to edit and duplicate it. So I've got a second one because we're going to create an offset line with that. And then I'm going to click on this heart and I'm going to go to edit and I'm going to send it to the back. Now, if it ever does this and it tells you that the order isn't there, just click on it again, move it out of the way, move that over. Come on, move. This is me not being good with the mouse, this. Bring your heart on and then put your pattern over the top because you can do it that way as well. It's up to you. Sometimes when you've been in Canvas for a while, and you've done quite a few processes, it goes, can't do any more, my brain's tired. If you just go back and refresh, it will allow you to do it. And to refresh, you just go into Canvas Workspace and open it up again. So now when I click on this, well, it's brought the heart to the front. Of course it has. Why would it not? Still not there. So what I'm going to do is save this project as it is now, because there's always a way around it and I want you to know the way around it, and go plus. So I've saved that now. So I'm going to get rid of all that, put it in the bin, and I'm going to refresh my page. So it says, do you want to leave? And you say yes, and it brings you back to the home page. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, when you go into new, because sometimes it does its own thing, like any technology does, and I go into my projects, and I bring up the project that we were working on. Let's see now if it allows me to send that to the back. So we're going to just nudge that over slightly, that heart, so I've got it in a position that I'm happy with. I'm then going to go to edit, and it's now allowing me to send it to the back. So there is always a way around it, and I've only learnt this by using it. And the great thing about Canvas Workspace is exactly the same as the great thing that I talked about last week on Minecraft Studio, is an undo button. Because if you do it wrong, you can undo it. And then if you decide you hadn't done it wrong, you can redo it. So it takes all the fear away. So that's now at the back. So I'm going to grab both of those shapes. I'm going to go to edit and I am going to subtract. And now I've got that shape in my heart. So now with this heart, that's exactly the same size. So if you want your heart to cut into your card, now that will cut into your cardstock. So you might want an 8x8 card blank that has that heart cut into it. You can now do that. You might want to cut that out of Mylar and use it as a stencil. You might want to cut that out of Doughflex and run it through your die cutting machine with your embossing mat and get it to emboss your card. This is what I mean about the scan and cut getting better and better and better. And the more you use it and the more you learn, the more it will give you. So this heart is a perfect fit for that, but I want it to be bigger. I want to create an offset line. So this time we go to edit and we choose our 2 concentric circles, and I want a 3mm outward offset line, but this time I don't need it to keep the original because we're not using it, so I can delete it. And then when I press OK, it's given me my offset line. So now I can position this, and you can align it, but I do find with hearts that it doesn't line up if you do it centrally vertically and centrally horizontally. It's better to roughly position it and then move it with your arrows. It's just the way that the heart is made. It's a strange shape, so it doesn't, it moves it either too far up or too far down. So that's just a little one for you for hearts. But then I can drag this, and if I want it to cut out of a piece of card, it will. And then if I don't want it to cut out of a piece of card, I don't use that outside edge. So now you can take any of those 30 patterns and use most of the, well, I think all of the basic shapes, and put them behind it and punch it into that. So now we're not looking at those 30 patterns anymore. You're looking at hundreds and thousands of different patterns, because you can take just that part, so the 4 diamonds and the little bit in between. You can take it as a row, as a border. You can put it in a circle. You can put it in an oval. You can put it in a letter. It's all those different things now, because we didn't press that one button that compounded that path. So next I'm going to teach you how you can make an aperture panel from one of the 30 patterns in any panel on any box.